Morning. Oh, audience participation already. I like it. I was asked to present today, and I'm deeply honored that I was asked in the first place to present about diversity. I'm deeply honored that you're here to listen. But more importantly, I think what I have to say today are really ideas that come from all of you. Now, first and foremost, is what's written in red on my notes here, is that I have to tell a story and I have to make this all very personal. So as I started, first of all, as I accepted doing this, I started panicking slightly, simply because diversity, I mean, you start thinking about it, it's so broad, what it is, you can drive a truck through it. I'm not sure if many of you know where I sit, some of you do, but I share an island with Natalia over in number 7 Harewood Avenue. And our little island is perched right in the middle of what I think is a bit of a runway, where everybody comes in the morning. So invariably people have to dodge our desk, and they will know us and we know them. It feels very much like Checkpoint Charlie in between East and West Germany at the time, in Berlin. But since it came out that I was doing this presentation, so many of you stopped by, pulled me aside, and had things to say about diversity and said, would you mind bringing this up? What about this? Have you thought about this? The support was absolutely tremendous. So it no longer became my story, although I was told to tell a story and make it personal. What's personal here is that these are all your stories. So this is a bit of a collection of things that I've heard. But I'll try to introduce some ideas that are actually unique to my beliefs about diversity and why we're here today. So the first thing is that we have to celebrate the fact that you're here not because you were told to come here, but because you want to be here. And one of the advisors who passed by my desk to give me all these ideas dropped this on my desk, the Harvard Business Review. There's a whole publication about diversity in the rainbow colors, clearly, saying most programs don't work. Here's what to do about it. So they're saying that what corporations have been doing with respect to diversity has actually been failing. We're not improving what the goals were to make the work environment more equal or to celebrate diversity as such. The fact that you're here, however, is exactly what this study talks about, namely that you don't coerce people into believing in diversity. You don't put them through programs where you're saying you have to attend. If you look around, what Vinay and his team have done is to put little cupcakes on our desks, have the people in the canteen wear the t-shirts, there's advertising left, right, and center. There's just genuine promotion by people who care to do something that they believe in and hopefully infect you. So this week, I think, has been a fantastic success, and rather this being the graveyard slot, which is technically the last end, where we'd say there would be fatigue, seems to be quite the contrary. You're all here, and you're here because you want to be here. And maybe also see me. Now, all these ideas started coming together rather late in the day. Even riding in my bike this morning, there was another idea that came up. I just have to weave that in, right? And there's just so much to do. And one time, José, when he asked me for my business plan, I was telling him, well, you know, it's marinating. He said, well, you better start cooking. Okay. And I did. So much about the preparation and why I'm here today. And let me now talk to you about things that annoy me somewhat. And I think things get lost, not just in translation, but also by the simple use of acronyms. CSR. Can't even figure my things out. ESG, TED, D&I, CIB. This all is losing its value simply by us expressing these things in acronyms. So TED, for example, this is a style of presentation that I learned afterwards about what it was. That means you give short and powerful presentations. TED stands for technology. Paul, what's the next one? Entertainment. And D, design. And this was a forum that celebrated discussions around about subjects that mattered. And it was one where people were asked to make short and powerful presentations. And when you go on YouTube and you see the quality of presentations that are coming out, knowing that you're going to do something like this today, you're kind of going, oh my God, maybe I can live up to it, maybe I won't. So this is me now doing this. So there's some effort who's gone into it. CSR. I don't like that either because it's completely lost its sense. CSR. Or how about CRS? Or say it. This is about corporations acting responsibly in society. Doesn't that ring a lot truer? We are a corporation. We have to act responsibly in society. We have designed 4 pillars. There's the economic pillar. Well, duh, we have to make money. Yes, but it's how we make money. We need to make money responsibly, and we must not break laws making money. We care about the environment, and we do things about our carbon footprint. As an institution, we have so much power to wield to make sure that we somehow do something that will help to introduce less damage to the environment. We're a civic institution. We have to behave responsibly in a civic way. What does that mean? Well, we pay taxes, lots of taxes. But it's not just taxes. We're charitable. And so you will have heard about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but you may not have heard about the Fondation BNP Paribas, where tens of millions of euros, value that you create, is actually dispersed for charitable causes. This other pillar, which is the one we're really talking about today, and this is where I finally come into my subject, is the social pillar. It's about people. We employ people. Indeed, the backbone of financial services is what? It's human capital. So to say capital and associate it with humans seems a bit harsh, but that's what it is. We're not a utility, we're becoming more utilitarian, but we are first and foremost about people. The value of this institution is its people. So corporations acting responsibly in society, our bedrock are these 4 pillars, and it's fantastic that when the shareholders or the researchers writing research about BNP Paribas as a stock, they write about this stock, taking into consideration those 4 pillars. So it's no longer just the bottom line. It's a virtuous circle. Worrying about those 4 pillars delivers better results. So I think that's fantastic. And that's a tectonic shift, really, in behavior of investment psychology. Is this any different from what you do as individuals? No, your family units, be it single households or family households, you make money, you have to, otherwise the unit won't work. You care about family members, you're social, you're civic, you pay taxes, lots of taxes, no doubt, but you're also charitable. So, and you care about the economy, right? Every Sunday evening, you will have to sort the glass from the paper. You do your part. So whatever you do as families, we as an institution can also do collectively all through yourselves. Now, the social pillar is the one we're talking about. Buried within that social pillar is what? 2 words. D&I, which again I don't like, but it's diversity and inclusion, and that means something. So let me talk a little bit about diversity. Now, what jumps at you when you think diversity will be the, okay, fine, it's gender, it's race, and it's physical disabilities. Outwardly things that you would see. But then there are other things. Creed, very important, certainly these days, where we have violence, so much violence created in the name of religions. That is extremely disappointing, but creed is part and parcel of who we are as people, and it's very important that we respect faith. Sexual preference, clearly, and gender identity, that for me is really a new term. So if you say LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, don't say LGBT all the time. Say those words. It's freer, it's liberating somehow to say those words that in other generations wouldn't be words that you should really be saying or even frown. LGBT rings hollow. Say it. National identity, very important, and I'll be talking about that in a second. And of course, the hidden disabilities. People have disabilities. People are different for things that you don't necessarily see. People can be recovering alcoholics. People can be depressive. These are sicknesses. Just as somebody who has been diagnosed with a cancer and he's come back, or she has come back and has been free of cancer, but this person will have scars that you need to address and to integrate these people once again. So these are sicknesses, and they need to be identified as sicknesses and helped. And as an institution, we can. I mentioned that financial services, the backbone, are human capital, is human capital. Now, as an individual, I have a disability. It's my disability. As a child, I was playing with friends, 2 boys, and I was playing ice hockey on a frozen lake. The usual story, crack in the ice, and I went under. I didn't find the hole. I suffered a blackout, and I woke up on the ice, alive. That tripped something in my mind that was claustrophobia. So, as a working individual, riding elevators, sitting in conference rooms, riding in airplanes, flying in airplanes, what I have to do in my daily chore, I struggle with. This room scares me. It's closed, there is no light, a lot of eyes are staring at me. Right? I'm afraid. But you develop tricks, you overcome it. And first and foremost, you talk about it, which helps. It calms me. But there are 6 floors of steel, concrete, and glass just waiting to crash down on me in my mind. Well, I'll be trapped like I was once trapped under the ice. That is my weakness. It's a big deal to me. And I have to overcome it, which I have. Now, diversity, as I said, is broad, extremely broad. So you even have what I would call pretty radical expressions of this by something like this. These are people who've got red hair. And they, a couple of weeks ago, just celebrated something called Ginger Pride. It's a big deal for them, right? It's fantastic. You go and search on Google the pictures, the beautiful pictures of these radicals going out there, organizing themselves into demonstrations and movements to celebrate the fact that they have a difference and a unique thing. They're redheads. It's a big deal for them. But unfortunately, as an institution, we're not thinking diverse enough. As an institution, we don't celebrate, we don't identify, we don't encourage, and we don't implement really diversity. When I think about diversity intellectually, I think of something like a kaleidoscope. Rub your eyes, close your eyes, and what do you see? You see patterns, you see color, it's rich, it's beautiful. Or think of a cornucopia, the horn of plenty. Or rather being stuffed with material things, a treasure trove, think of beautiful ideas. Lots and lots of ideas that interconnect and mean something in their entirety. I still believe in institution, this is the chapter diversity, that we act too much according to group thought. Groupthink becomes norm, and norms are accepted. I think groupthink is damaging. It stifles and it suffocates. And I feel that is absolutely wrong. So much for the diversity component. But before I move on to talking about inclusion and inclusiveness, let me just read you some statistics. And these are important. And this comes from research, objective data. This is information that is not just dreamt up. This is not disinformation. It's empirical. These are statistics. So, starting with BNP Paribas Securities Services, we actually are doing pretty well. All staff, 46% women. That's huge. That's great. 70% international, not just French, clearly. However, at the COMEX level, the senior level, the EXCO, Comité Exécutif, 20% women, and 35% international. Okay? So why is it that the base says one thing and the tip says something else? It's wrong. So we have targets, and we're going to move down that way. We're aware of it, and we're going to try to fix it. Women in the workplace, you're less likely to receive the first critical promotion to a manager. And this will be the only time I'm actually reading. Women receive informal feedback less frequently than men. Ethnic minorities in business. The good thing is there are more people, a rising number of people identifying with an ethnic minority. We're coming out, as it were, about our minorities. But there is a generalized failure to fully engage the economic value of these minorities. So you think about startups, where ethnic minorities as such are more prevalent, in fact, than white people, because these ethnic minorities don't always necessarily get into the investment banks, they don't get into these first big corporations, and so they're almost forced to go into a startup. Statistics show startups, by definition, you have more ethnic minorities in basic startups, and startups are prone to fail. So that's a bit of a vicious circle right there. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. 40% of gay men have experienced homophobia in the workplace. That's bad. But what's worse, 60% of the Generation Y LGBT graduates who have come out while at university go back into the closet when they start work. Well, what happened there? Why were they strong enough to come out as students, and when they go to the office and start working, all of a sudden that's not right anymore? It's wrong. Working parents, I empathize immensely with working mothers. A third of Britain's working mothers are the main earners in their family. They are, for the most part, low earners because they don't get those chances that the men get when they start. But they're carrying families where the husband's not necessarily working. Early careers, the youth. Today, we are in a pretty awful economic environment. It's been going on for some years. The consequence of this is that we have youth unemployment. This youth is wasted. In Spain, it's up to 50%. Europe-wide, it's 20%. In Germany, it's 7%. Disparity across the board. Okay. I have 50 minutes. I'll talk a little bit now about inclusion. Because there is diversity and there is inclusion. So why do we have two words? Now, I thought of 3 chapters. One would be looking at it from an institutional point of view. The other would be to look at it from the you point of view. And the last one would be to look at it from a me point of view. Now, I've only got 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes. Which one would you like to hear about?
You. Always you.
Okay. I was hoping that was going to be the one. So let me just take a sip of water. Now, actually, I'm a pretty improbable advocate. I'm a member of a white, privileged majority. I don't know why I'm reading this because I should know this. But I'm a white, heterosexual male. I'm agnostic in faith. And I appear not to have any outward physical disabilities. Would this speech be any stronger if it were a woman giving it, if it were a black man giving it, or if it were a gay person giving it? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of power in somebody who belongs to a majority of sorts, who's been privileged to say something about diversity and inclusion and what it means to be aware of this. So my first point is that I'm an ally. I empathize with the working mothers. I empathize immensely with the LGBT community. I empathize with minorities. I try to be aware of what it is that makes it difficult for them to be what I am, seemingly normal. So being an ally is something that already is a pretty big commitment to recognize that, because you start studying it and you end up in places like this to speak about these things. Now, there is another reason why I'm here. Well, you perhaps don't hear it, but I'm German. And I think in German, I count in German, I dream in German. When I get mad, it comes out really good in German, right? Why I'm talking about this is because I think this harks onto a reality today that was something that I grew up with 50 years ago. My parents were in the Foreign Office, in the Foreign Service. 50, 60 years ago, that was pretty much the end of the Second World War. Germany was not what it is today. It was a destroyed country, a hated country. Nobody liked Germany. My father was part of the first wave of German diplomats to go out and represent their country abroad. And when you think about diplomats, you think about Washington, you think about Paris, you think about major cities that somehow associated with diplomacy are cool. Cities like Colombo, Mogadishu, Nairobi, Reykjavik, Ottawa, not necessarily countries or cities that you would associate with the country because they're less cool, but those were the stations that we started off in. And you go there as a German, and you are told to build bridges. Practice inclusion. Say, yep, we did something awful. And there's a lot of trauma, but life goes on, we need to rebuild. So, one of the things that my parents insisted on, and I'll say this with my father's accent when he spoke to me in English, mein Junge, he still said that in German, wenn in public, never, ever speak to me in German. You will speak English, and you will call me not Papa, you will call me Daddy. Daddy, right? This is his way of pronouncing Daddy. So, that's what I did. So when we were in public, I was English or American or whatever, but at home, I was at home. We spoke German, we listened to German music, I was told German bedtime stories, and it was only ever really German. So why did we have to hide? And yet, when I came out, and I was out in the environment, I had to integrate. Yeah, so, funny stories, no doubt, especially when I was in California, and this guy goes, dude, why do you call your dad Daddy? Is that some sort of a German thing? Okay, yeah. So, other aspects of this exercise in integration was moving to South Africa in the early 60s. Apartheid was a reality, and we lived in a privileged white community, completely separated from black people. We had a maid, we had a gardener, and we practiced apartheid as guests in that country, as representatives. Diversity and inclusion doesn't mean that you can't stand up for what you believe in and think that is right. We had a pool, and the gardener and the maid had children who weren't living with us. They weren't supposed to, they weren't allowed to. So on weekends, the gardener and the maid would go and see their children, or indeed, perhaps come and visit, which is what my father and my mother suggested they do. 2 boys, 7 and 9, same age as my brother and me, and we would be swimming in the pool. The first weekend when we were there, lo and behold, a police car pulls up. The neighbors had called the police to say they're breaking the law. Now, diplomatic immunity means this is our space, this is our territory. So my father had a discussion with them and said, well, I'm sorry, but this is what we do. This is how it's going to be. These are 2 black boys playing with 2 white boys. I don't see a color difference, but you obviously do. They're staying and they're going to play. Every weekend, there was a continuing diplomatic incident. But he persisted in doing that. Southern California, I was enrolled into a school that was 95% populated by Jewish students. This is my parents practicing inclusion through me, saying, Oern, it's a good school. It's a very good school. You're going to go there. Not once, as this young German, non-Jewish, did I ever experience any type of dissension, discussion, criticism for being a German, having had parents who clearly lived through the war, being surrounded by Jewish kids. Diversity and inclusion, it works. And there was nothing more beautiful than children at the core practicing this and demonstrating that things can change. So I learned to be, or rather question established authority. Now, what's also important about inclusion is delivery. My questioning of established authority, which started with my parents, they struggled with me because I asked a lot of questions. My teachers, the law enforcement officers, which I've also encountered, as well as my bosses in professions. Lots of times this came across as being disrespectful. I asked a question, but already here you see me say it like this in this pose. I asked a question. Well, it's how you deliver it. My intensity was interpreted as being disrespectful. So I think practicing inclusion, being inclusive, ease up, right? You know you have agenda. You want to get a point across. Sometimes it works by having a discussion, a conversation, and delivering it in a way that is inviting. So my personal issue still is clearly that I am very emphatic sometimes, and my intensity is often interpreted as being disrespectful, but I'm not, at least trying not to be. Now, as an associate in investment banking, something pissed me off immensely. Now, in the days when you were in your 20s or 30s and you're starting off, you would be working night shifts, late night shifts, in order to give those fancy PowerPoint presentations and very complicated Excel spreadsheets that demonstrated some opportunity of arbitrage to your bosses. You would work late, sometimes all-nighters, often all-nighters. To see the trading floor transform from an all-white male population to empty, and there would be the odd young'uns still there, and then these waves of cleaners would go through the ranks of these trading floor desks. All black men for the most part. What was up with that? It was either the shift between 10 and 12 in the evening, or was the shift between 4 and 6 in the morning. I saw them both. Every time it was that. Still today, it is exactly that. Only now the mix is not just blacks or other ethnicities, but it's also those new people coming from the Eastern Shores. Latvians, Lithuanians, Poles, Russians, right? Wrong. So something needs to be done about that. What I think this is about is social inequality. You all have your individual ways of changing this and making a change. Inequality goes deep. It's beyond the ability of any single individual to overcome. You need to recognize it, and recognizing it is already the first step. And you are being inclusive, but then you can do things. So my gig, for example, to know that I couldn't help those cleaners coming through to all of a sudden come onto my trading floor as workers in that sense, to be a trader or an associate, I could maybe do something else that would be further down the chain. So I started teaching in a reading program that BNP Paribas sponsors. St. Mary's School down the road. They have 30 ethnic representations there, right? All from families that are either newly immigrants or just in a economic spiral that allows them with great difficulty to break out of that. The snippet of reading that I could contribute in the 1 or 2 hours every week, walking from here over there, was very valuable. I could teach them mathematics, rudimentary, give them extra skills from somebody who's not necessarily a teacher, but somebody else was a volunteer. And that helped. The other very interesting charity that we're now setting up, and there are 2 representatives in the room here that have backed it, Claire Misata, Making the Leap, together with Denise Everill, is an initiative that means that we are going to do one thing. We're going to help these kids who are now graduating from schools develop interview skills. That's one thing where we can really contribute. How so? Well, I have, as a manager, had to hire people, interview junior people, and I can tell you the breadth of abilities to deliver a good interview is immense. If you can give them the courage, teach them how to better interview, focus on the people who are struggling, well, I think we're going to do something that's pretty good. And to overcome this one inequality, not today, but over time. So, making the leap, suited and booted, I think is the right word, although we have to think, change the booted bit because it makes you think that you've been kicked out, but it's more the sense that booted is you got your shoes on, laced up, etc., etc. But you will be asked to be volunteers. You will be trained on how to encourage people to interview better, and they will then be helping these kids develop interview skills, sent around to different schools. I think these are fantastic programs that you should know exist, that we are encouraging to promote. Your time can be spent doing something of this nature. And you're encouraged to do this. I think by virtue of your employment contract, you do know that you can spend a full day doing some sort of a charitable cause. So don't give this necessarily to the firm to do the one thing you do every day in and day out to make money, but address it on some of the other pillars, the social, the environmental, and the economic pillars. Now, I've run out of time. If it's okay, I've got 2 more things to say. Is that what you're seeing here is an institutional representation of inclusion and diversity. Don't forget, we are BNP Paribas Securities Services, and for those people who are not from Securities Services, but from global markets, or from FIC, or from corporate bank, we're here, we've just joined this campus, we are 10,000 people globally. The rest of CIB, you are 20,000. So it's a figure to be reckoned with. We're across the road. This is pretty daunting for us to be as close as we are today, to see you slick investment bankers versus us who do asset administration and transaction banking. It's possibly less, it's less glamorous in the eyes of some, but it's fundamentally a very profitable business, and it's sound, and these are good products. And now we see, as investment banking becomes more commoditized, utilitarian, you have a lot to learn from what Security Services has to deliver in terms of industrialized processes. These are all the buzzwords. So CIB, corporate and institutional banking, is extremely important in the sense of diversity and inclusion. So we're here, and we'd like you to welcome us as much as we'll be welcoming you. Lastly, this is all about you. Remember always that there's no shame in feeling that perhaps you were biased in some sense. Our brains are naturally wired to be biased. It's normal for our brains to be biased. Our minds are stubborn beasts. That's a fact. So you actually have to be proactive about overcoming this natural bias, and you can. There's a very simple story, a very interesting story that I think will demonstrate this and how we actually have to work at being effective in diversity and inclusion. It's called the blind orchestra. In the 50s and the 60s, you would find that possibly maybe 5 or 10% of members of the orchestra would be women. It took years of research and possibly even also practical examples by putting the people going for auditions behind a screen and making the women in particular take their heels off such that the person listening would really not know whether or not this was a man or a woman. And lo and behold, simply by a little trick like that, that orchestra became 50% male and 50% female. So these trained musicians thinking that, or listening and auditioning and making sure they had the best music in the world playing, it took a little thing like that for them to recognize they hadn't done anything wrong as such, but they were just normally wired to think that and select. Although this person was playing beautiful music, she was a woman, and there was another guy who was a man, and for some reason, the man was chosen over the woman. Now, there's no universal definition of the categories of diversity. Don't even attempt to make it exhaustive. That would be missing the point entirely. It is what it means to you. Now, I'll read this because I think these are powerful words. You should be comfortable about being you in the workplace. This is not about you wearing your difference on your sleeve, but rather nobody should feel compelled to hide their difference. Thank you very much.